He's got a great presentation to share with us, and we've got a great panel plan. So real quick, just wanted to show you guys the agenda we've got. So we'll start off with a keynote presentation from Guy, and then we will have a panel discussion with Guy, Dave, Jared, and myself, just talking through more questions about AEO. And then we'll have some catered dinner arrive, so if anyone wants to hang out and chit chat, you can, or you can grab that and go. So we're really excited for the event. Wanted to just say a thank you to Webflow and Ampli for making this happen and creating this event. And we're excited to go from here, and wanted to thank Guy for being able to present. So wanted to share just a quick bio of Guy before he gets up here. So let me pull that up. So Guy Yalif is a former CMO and MarTech CEO with over 20 years of experience helping marketers use AI to drive revenue on websites and across digital advertising. Currently, Webflow's chief evangelist, Guy has been a marketing leader at Twitter, Brightroll, Tradeweave, Yahoo, and Intellimise. He has been a part of 4 successful exits and was a co-founder and CEO of Intellimise, which Webflow acquired in 2024. He was also an aerospace engineer and made the oh-so-typical journey from there to CMO. So thank you, Guy, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Bradford, and the team. Hey. Thanks, everybody, for coming out, taking time on a busy Wednesday. I got some stuff to cover. Covering the stuff's not the thing. Talking and asking questions throughout, that's the thing. And if we get off track on time, I'll just keep going and then we'll answer during the Q&A. How many people in this room have their traffic going down? Yeah, it's smaller than I would have thought. Most people are seeing, whoops, let me switch to the other one. Most people that we talk to, so because of this job, this made up job of chief evangelist, which is being out in the field talking to CMOs all the time, is required me. That CMO, let's see, they'll like look at this. That I see most folks talking about losing 10, 15, 20% of their traffic. This study from Bain felt right. You see headlines of like 80, 90%. Not hearing any CMO say that. Okay, part of that, obviously, is because people are using the LLMs more and they're answering the questions there because it's useful. There's a silver lining. Because they're getting their questions answered, they're also further down the funnel. At Webflow last summer, 8% of our self-serve signups came from LLM search traffic. Fine, small, growing, but it converted 6 times better than our unbranded SEO traffic. Not 6%, 6 times. And literally every CMO I've talked to has said, yes, it's a whole lot better. Ahrefs and SEMrush, the 2 stalwarts in SEO, said 4x to 23x. And so there is real opportunity here. But I invite you to see answer engine optimization, AEO or GPO or AIO, as both threat and opportunity to both parts of our jobs in building businesses, building brands and driving demand. And on the brand side, we don't control our brand narrative as much as we'd like to. With Google, they used our words and now they're all being reformulated by the LLMs. It is totally normal for an LLM to list you as a whole bunch of features, totally leave out your core value, or confidently get it wrong, or leave you out entirely. And we see Columbia found a whole bunch of the citations they do are wrong. And so, question.
Are questions okay?
Yeah, please do.
Could a lot of that be because of different additions to those citations or citations that have changed, or is it just pulling out the wrong citation altogether?
So this was, if memory serves me right, 40% were wrong, 20% weren't there at all. And candidly, while the 15 to 25% I think is spot on, this felt high. It helps illustrate the point. It's from a credible source. It's not made up stuff. But this feels high to me in personal experience and in talking to others. Still, why do they get them wrong? I think in the same way that they have worked so hard on not linking you off to a page that doesn't exist. I think they're getting much better at their own version of RAG, at their own version of, I'm gonna go run a search, use that through my LLM together with my pre-trained knowledge and give you an answer. I think they were doing less of this first thing before. And so they use all the pre-training, right? The whole internet as of a few months ago, and they would just get it wrong. And so my bet is this was done in early 25. I'd be shocked if this number were this high now. It's a helpful illustrative point. This point, however, is still super duper uber true. So maybe I need to find a different stat to illustrate it. This takeaway is still super true.
Thank you.
Yep. To put it in perspective, for Webflow, it's still small but meaningful traffic. This is a view of our traffic, just unbranded SEO and LLM referred humans. Because I think those are comparable. And you go back to the summer before last, LLMs, which is the blue, was not 1%. 12 months later, it was 42%. Not of all of our traffic, but just of this total. And so it is something worth paying attention to, and presumably you're all here because you thought the same thing. So I invite you to think about AEO as close to a good SEO it should have been. I think some people are trying to do good LinkedIn clickbait to either say SEO is dead, and I could not disagree more, 180 degrees black and white, or AEO equals SEO. I also don't think that's right. I think good AEO is rewarding genuinely valuable original content that's useful to your prospects throughout the funnel. That's what we all should have been doing. And I invite you to think about the transition from one to the other in 4 categories. And this is where we'll spend most of our time. And please ask questions throughout. The first is content, where we shift from our topical clusters have been groups of keywords. Now they shift to baskets of questions. Questions that you know what your prospects are asking, but if you're looking for inspiration, go run an LLM over your on-call recordings. Go run an LLM over your sales or CSCs. Go look in Google at people also asked. Okay, then you pick those questions, you're like, I want to be in the answers to those. And then have your team or you go write answers to those questions. And over time, write them throughout the funnel and with some depth. Why the depth? Because the LLMs, they are getting queries that are longer than Google, and I know Google has Gemini search, is getting. When we all learn to speak Google, our average query is 4 words long. For the LLMs, the average is 23. It's growing and they get a full conversation. So they are sending traffic to 2.5x more domains than searches. So 1.5x more. That means if you thought about, I'll take SaaS as an example, of creating that extra article that was like, here's how this very specific feature works, it's more likely to be rewarded in AEO than it was in SEO. So that's what I mean by the depth. And lastly, you want it to be relevant. They have great signals on what's valuable. Is this helpful altitude? Just checking in. Okay, technical. We've all been doing on page and more for SEO. The single biggest incrementally higher valued thing with AEO is signals about the structure and meaning of your site. By the way, for those that were around for SEO 20 plus years ago, myself included, like Google was the same, and then it got really, really good at crawling sites. How many people never know schema? Now it's almost everybody. 6 months ago, it was like 5% of the room. For those that haven't heard of it, it is something that a few startups, Google, Yandex, Bing, and Yahoo came up with 6 years ago. It's a way to just tag your site with metadata, stuff that the LLM sees that the human doesn't. That's like, here's an events page, here's a product page, here's a bio page, here's a company page. And that, it's hard to overstate how valuable that is for an LLM because you're serving it up on a silver platter. You're helping them understand this is the meaning of my site. You're lowering their costs, their crawl budget. You're making it easier for them. And then you want to do that on a super fast site globally. Authority shifts from backlinks, which meant it took a long time to have a big impact. They still matter, don't stop. But now, LLMs incrementally value more plain text mentions because they're searching for consensus. They are looking across sites, doing a search almost every single query, and seeing, hey, do I see, oh, your company was mentioned in a top 10 list on 5 different sites. That must be great. And so digital PR is back. Having people do podcasts and speaking, like that all has a bigger impact. And you want this pointing to a visually stunning, emotionally evocative site. Why? The LLM can see, did you bounce back? Google can see that too in search, right? They refer to you, did you bounce back? They also can see through ChatGPT and Perplexity's browser, because they're telling you I got an LLM running in it, they can see, did you stay on the site? Was it engaging? It's a signal of authority. Make sense? Last one, measurement. Keywords ranking just don't exist when you're talking about a paragraph of text. And so we start with measuring for the basket of questions I care about, did I show up? And then you mature to, what was my share of voice relative to my competitors in those questions? And then you mature even further to, was the sentiment positive? Was the message pull through good? Was it accurate? Like a whole bunch of things that just don't exist when Google's using our words. Make sense? This is the overview. Like if you take away one thing, it's this. Now we'll go into, by the way, I skipped earlier. This is very intentionally not a Webflow pitch. One sentence on Webflow. Webflow is an enterprise website building platform that makes it really easy for marketers, designers, and developers to build, manage, and optimize visually stunning sites that tell great stories, build your brand, that also then drive revenue through ABM, testing, and personalization, coding optional. Sites like NCR, New York Times, UFC, Duracell, and a whole bunch more. Right? All right, let's go into content. Oh, sorry. You have an opportunity to lead, a big one. When we surveyed marketers, 93% of marketing leaders and 91% of practitioners said, you know what, AEO is going to be impactful, not just to my marketing team, but to my entire business over the next couple of years. Then we asked the practitioners, do you know what AEO is? 25% said, yep, I've got a firm grasp of it. So you have a real opportunity to lead in your companies or your clients' companies to help them through this journey. And it's a journey we're all discovering. It's very early innings in a new medium. So as you think about content, again, you go from being keyword focused to picking some answers. At Webflow, we, and by we, I mean Vivian Huang, who runs our SEO AEO team, started with questions that she thought had high website visit intent. If somebody asks this question, the answer is likely not going to only be answered there on ChatGPT. It's going to cause them to click over to the site. That might be like case studies, or in our case, we're not templated at all, but we do have a template library that causes people to come over and then they're like, we want to do something custom. Then you answer them throughout the funnel and in depth, and finally you want to make sure it's personalized. Why? Again, the LLMs have more context. We talked about this before. We then ran tests. And when Vivian reframed some of our blog posts headings as questions, she got 13% more traffic from the LLMs. It's not statistically significant. This is not stat-sig research. This is anecdotal, but she's going to go do that for our future blog posts. Yes?
Okay, so the risk of being like obtuse, when you say personalized, how deep are you actually getting? Is it literally down to this individual from this site coming from this IP address and you know who they are already? How personalized is it?
Great question. By the way, Amplitude team, is it important to repeat the messages, the questions for the recording or no?
No, we're good.
Okay, we're good, thank you. I invite you to think about it as a spectrum and really to optimize for the human rather than the machine. And the spectrum being, you can improve the experience for everybody, and I get technically that's not personalization, but like go do A/B testing. You can narrow to a segment and do personalization, right? If they saw this ad creative children's thing. You can narrow it further, especially if you're B2B, and do it per account. And I know people don't talk about ABM and personalization in the same bucket, but I mean, ultimately it's the same mental model. And then you could use AI, I don't mean Gen AI, like machine learning to go personalize down to the individual, literally, and like auto-discover segments. And so my humble suggestion would be go where the juice is worth the squeeze. As you are seeing more benefit from it, lean into it. Rather than go after the places where it's not working, go lean into the places where it is working. And right, there's an infinite spectrum of specificity you can go to.
Sure.
Do the cost benefit as empirically, not because you predetermined it in advance. Does that land?
Sure.
The one other thing I'll share, the LLMs aren't rendering JavaScript.
Can you repeat that again?
The LLMs are not, as they're crawling your page, rendering JavaScript.
Okay.
Which means that they're downloading your page first and just crawling that. Gemini is probably an exception because Google's search crawler renders JavaScript. That means personalization for the LLMs more often means creating a whole bunch of different pages by persona, by product, by use case, than it does personalizing on the fly. Personalizing on the fly works, it's conversion rate optimization, but it's not yet helpful for AEO outside of Gemini. Question?
Yeah, we've often heard good SEO is good AEO.
Yeah.
But I kind of wonder if they don't necessarily have to be. And what I mean by that is, could you theoretically go publish 1,000 short blog posts with just one question answer, and just robot.text like Google and just have Gemini and ChatGPT and Claude crawl those and really optimize for AEO while sort of preserving, you're still tight on your website because of that. You want your topic clusters to be nice and tight. So you're not diluting that. Would that theoretically work?
Great question. Several pieces of data that help collectively try to figure out an answer. One is on the good SEO is good AEO. I humbly submitted, generally agree. I think the Venn diagram, and I'm doing that just for that, but is like this,
Yeah.
right? That it's not that all of SEO is in AEO, it's not that all of AEO is in SEO, but they're totally not like this, and they're not 100% like this. Okay, data proof for that, 52% of Google's page one results, 52% of Google's AI citations were on page one in the search results. So being good at SEO is helpful, but not required.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thought. The other thought, a lot of people have taken the mental model you were describing even further and said, I'm gonna chunk up all my content, right? I'm gonna make it super easy for the LLM to consume. Google, literally, Danny Sullivan came out last week and said, don't. He said, if that works, it's gonna be short-lived because we want you to optimize for the human. Please optimize for the human, and I'm glad as a AEO SEO person. Now, to your point, I see you smiling skeptically. There are limits to that. But he was saying don't go to that extreme. We have played with, I do wonder, and have not seen data yet, if you took all your FAQs from your whole site, put them on one page, would that be effective? My bet is it won't. But should you put one page per FAQ? I don't know that you have to go that far. The real answer? Go try. Right? It's true for all of this for two reasons. One, we all know it's empirical, right? Even for SEO, it's empirical. And two, Google knew what they were doing in their algorithm before. We know the LLMs themselves, they say they don't know how it works. So they're figuring it out too. The last thing I'll say, sorry, is I also feel like the pattern matching from the early days of search is so appropriate. Many players, it's changing all the time. What matters in the details is changing, but the fundamentals of creating good content hasn't changed and won't. And that'll over time consolidate to fewer players and things changing less often. Question?
I think your question kind of comes back to part of the pillars where you have the authority piece too, where you could have a bunch of questions that are just one piece, but then what the LLMs are going to look at as well is, are other people saying the same thing? And are you answering it as well as other people? And are those people then being mentioned in other pieces of content, right? So you could have the exact answer that the LLM wants, but it's going to list somebody else because they have authority, because other people are then mentioning them and they have more of a full answer and everything inside of that.
So that resonates, and it's a good reminder to keep going in this because we'll get to authority, but that totally resonates, one humble guy's opinion. A couple of other pieces of data. So the content machine is as voracious as ever. Your content needs refreshing more even than it did for SEO. 95% of ChatGPT citations were updated in the last 10 months. And so I hear many people talking about, great, I'm going to stratify what's the most important content, I'm going to update that quarterly. The less important content will be semi-annually. What I haven't seen any data on, I've seen data that if you have a freshness indicator, like last updated, you'll get 1.4x more citations, fine. What I haven't seen any data on is, can you black hat it, just change the date, and that'll be enough. I hope that doesn't work, but I haven't seen data one way or the other. We try this. Vivian. She happened to use AirOps as a tool. She 5x the speed of refreshing content in 2 months. That content got 42% more traffic, and converted. That traffic converted 14% better. Like, what's not to love? Same human, same hours, more traffic, higher conversion. Like, those two don't normally go together. And so what we have observed is you can have an impact actually quite quickly because the LLMs are searching almost every time. It's in search, it took weeks, months to have an impact. Here you can have an impact tomorrow. By the way, and then I'll answer this question and then I'll go on. The dark side of that upside is that, I know this doesn't apply to anybody here, but if you have outdated content on your site, that will impact the LLM for a while. If you change your positioning in some other site, as they're looking at authority, has outdated content, that will stay with you for longer. And so the notion of, oh wait, this body of pages is out of date, maybe I should take it down, like over my dead body in SEO land, in AEO land, it's not an invalid question to at least ask if you're not gonna get there for a long time. See what empirically what is impacting the question.
I was just curious in this study, what, like content refreshes, what does that entail for you?
For her, she rewrote, she chose to focus on blogs and she rewrote them, made them longer, added more content to them. It was a substantial upgrade in this case.
It wasn't just like adding a few keywords and
It was not.
It was more like refreshing the actual content.
In this not statistically significant example, yes, it was a meaningful upgrade, and I had curiosity to that point about, hey, can I just change the date? Is that black hat? Hopefully it is, hopefully that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Where's the boundary? I do not know, and if anybody else has played, I'm curious.
Does this apply at all, to updating homepages, about pages, or is it primarily like case studies, blog posts?
My perception is that this is throughout. We've seen this work on, like, for example, on our product pages, we tried experimenting with structure. And so we put on-page structure. We took the exact same content, added FAQs underneath for our top 6 product pages. The FAQs, then we put schema on those 6. In 2 weeks, more than half of our incremental citations as Webflow came from those 6 pages. We have thousands of pages on our site. More than half came from those, and they got 24% more traffic. And so that doesn't equal speed of content refresh, but it is indicator that you can have an impact elsewhere. Which question? All right, I'm gonna keep going. You might also be tempted to say, great, I've got LLMs, I can go create all infinite content mercifully. Seems like that's not working right now. Our friends at Graphite looked at a bunch of Google AI citations. 85% of them were either human or human plus a little bit of AI. I've got friends who've started companies that detect this statistically. I got questions from my friends at Graphite, how did they detect these two? But still, the notion that it's generally not working makes me happy. That's content. Technical. We move from on-page SEO to on-page structure, the FAQs, bulleted lists, doing the punchline earlier in your article than you would have otherwise. Considering rephrasing things as questions, not dogmatically, but where it might be helpful. Then adding the metadata. None of this matters if you don't have the fundamentals, right? If you've got broken links on your site, go fix that. That'll give you more juice for the squeeze. But go add the metadata, go do it in an automated way, and then the highest level of maturity I'd submit is just bobbing and weaving with the changing standards, right? If you've got a functional site, go set up an MCP. We support LLMs.txt. There is zero evidence that the LLMs use it yet. In fact, several of them have said we don't. And so, when folks are like, go update that right away, I'm like, it should be on your list. It should not be top of the list. Right? That's more future-proofing thought. We tried some of this, and we added simply in our CMS template, let's add a table of contents, 59% more traffic from LLMs, 23% more content from Google SEO. And by the way, most of the experiments we ran when we got more from the LLMs, we also got more from SEO. So an example, will this one work for you? Who knows? Is it worth running an experiment to try? Absolutely. And you'll notice these aren't yet, I went and bought Profound or Scrunch or others to see where I showed up more. This was purely using our existing analytics. You can also then use those. As I mentioned, I humbly suggest you can go, if you don't have SEO metadata on all your pages, I presume you do because you're here, but like 25% of Google's top 10 results don't. So there's still fundamentals to go do. Go do accessibility. The LLMs are using it. And then finally, I mentioned schema before. It is hard to overstate how valuable it is. This was the example before of these top 6 product pages. Those are the FAQs at the bottom. Here's the schema, and there are the stats we talked about. One last one, and then I'll take the questions. It's early innings. You really have the chance to lead. 73% of Google's top 10 search results have schema in them today. 88% of sites don't have schema. Like, there's so much opportunity for you or your clients if you're an agency here. And if you put structured metadata, schema or otherwise, on average, 42% increase in citations. And Google's been advising us to do that in structured data for a long time. Question?
Any tools you recommend for drafting schema or try to do it manually?
Tools to recommend for drafting schema. I have seen several friends start companies doing that. I'm not pitching, but only because I'm familiar with it. Webflow is the only CMS I know of that will do it automatically. And the team spent a boatload of time. I'm not saying you should then do it with Webflow, whomever you do it with. A lot of time tuning LLMs to crawl your page to say which one of the hundreds of schema is right. Now that I picked the right one, how do I ensure I'm inserting the right content from your page into the right tag, into the right block within the schema JSON LD? That's worth investing time in because you don't want to feed it crap. I have not seen you say, oh, did I show up in the LLMs? You mentioned Profound, Scrunch, and a whole bunch of Ahrefs and SEMrush and a bunch of others. I don't hear a list of companies like that for schema generation. Question?
With WordPress, what I love about it is its compatibility with bulk editor plugins. So if you wanted to bulk edit meta for the site, what's Webflow's compatibility with plugins like that?
Great question. So Webflow purposely chose, you could argue, and I know the words I'm about to say are informed by the fact that I work for Webflow.
Sure.
More secure.
Okay.
I'm bagging on plugins, fine. Approach where a lot of it you can do directly. So the bulk editing, we intentionally do it in a way that we'll auto-generate a bunch of it, and then you go yes, no, edit, yes, no, edit, because we want the human in the loop. That's one part of the answer. The other part that's more directly analogous to the plugin is we were the first CMS to support an MCP. So you can go to ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and say, I want to do this bulk action, and it'll go execute it across all the pages. You can go create content, you can go change your design, you can go do virtually everything, not literally everything yet, but virtually everything through an LLM.
Cool.
Question and then question.
Yeah, do you think schema helps the LLMs, or do you think schema helps your SEO so that you're included in the LLMs more often?
It is a great question, and I think it is a little bit circular. I'm not backing on the question. I think both reinforce each other. The fact that that Google has asked for schema long before LLMs existed means they do value it. I believe that the LLMs value it more because they just aren't as good at crawling and parsing pages as Google is yet. And so my humble opinion, it has more of an impact on AEO, but the secondary effect on SEO doesn't hurt because that also then, because they do a search and then they effectively use search as their RAG, that helps AEO again. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That is educated hypothesis, not data-driven. There's a question here. Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the problems that I've seen with many accordions is that it uses a lot of client-side rendering.
Yeah.
And so it's not in the initial DOM
Yeah.
when the HTML loads. But when you have schema, a lot of times that is using some type of AJAX call to inject it dynamically on the page. So here's the problem. If the LLM sees the schema but does not render the JavaScript for the accordion, how does the schema help?
Great question. What I have seen so far, and I'm ultra curious about this, is that Google would say, hey, wait a minute, you treated the bot differently than everybody else, that's black hat. The LLMs have happily, so far, in many of the examples I've heard, consumed schema that has different info that's on the page. Not contradictory, but more. I've seen friends say, I really wish my message pull-through was better. I'm gonna put in schema on every single page, company schema with my boilerplate, because I want it to pass through more. Haven't seen people be digging for that. The FAQ one, I've seen people say, I'm gonna put the FAQs in the schema, but not visible on the page, because I don't think it makes sense. Not digging for that. So I am super curious where that boundary will be. I personally have not seen data on it, and I think it is an important place to explore. They have not been as black and white as Google is now, Google wasn't as much in its early days, and this is their early days. Maybe they will be over time. I don't know if anybody else has data on it.
Because one of the tests that I've seen on, at least with the agency that I work with, is that when it comes to rendering still remains foundational for any kind of bot, even for Google bot. Even though Google can render a fair amount of client-side rendered content, Common Crawl does not render any JavaScript whatsoever. And if Common Crawl data is often used for RAG and LLM training, there lies a lot of big problems for LLMs to see what's on the page because they rely on Common Crawl data.
So I'm totally with you with one exception. So I'm totally with you that what goes down the first delivery,
Yes.
not client-side rendered, is hugely important and often missed, right? It really does matter a ton to the FAQ question. Common Crawl, as I understand it, it's used for pre-training. It's not used for RAG. I believe RAG is all doing search or calling another tool. They may do a crawl, they may run code, they may write, but Common Crawl is not, as I understand it, one of the things they're going to use it in for its time. They use it at pre-training time. Still, your point is valid, right? And looking at the time, I'm going to keep going with some because we're going to have some great questions. I'll go more quickly through these. In authority, you had some great points. I totally agree, right? We go from backlinks, which still matter, to talking about stuff we've got the right to talk about. Everyone in the room familiar with EAT? Yeah. So that is more actively rewarded. Digital PR, totally back because you are mentioned in more places. How many people in this room are playing with Reddit? That is a lot higher than I thought it would be. I'll share a point of view and I'm curious if it resonates. This is a dangerous place for most companies to play. I think the value of it in ChatGPT was high, has gone down. It's still high, but is overstated. I hear many people saying, I'm gonna go invest in Reddit. I'm like, hold on, have you invested in YouTube? Have you invested in all these other channels that still have authentic human real content, which is why Reddit did those deals, that are more familiar for marketers? And then I humbly suggest, and I'm curious again if this resonates, if you're gonna go play here, one, lurk thoughtfully, and by that I mean, go learn the norms before you speak. Like spend some real time learning how each subreddit works. And the second is don't lie. And I don't actually mean don't lie, I presume you're not gonna do that. I mean, we're not used to saying, I fucked that up. We're not good at that. Sorry, we made a mistake. You should go elsewhere for that. But if you don't do that here, you're gonna get flamed. And so we, as Webflow, chose to go after Reddit. We had a whole team go after it. Spend, I don't know how long, a month or two learning. And then to think about every response. There's no pitch. We admit when we're wrong, we genuinely help, we follow up, that's getting rewarded. Has that had a huge impact on the LLMs? Some. And then go do a bunch of thought leadership, and then go be recognized as that, ultimately to go get a bunch of plain text positive mentions. And as an example of that, this is not off-site, but on-site, we played with, hey, let's just go add more external stats and validation to add authority. 14% more AI traffic, 8% more SEO traffic. Not the be all end all, but also doesn't hurt. Any questions on this?
What do you mean by external stats?
When I would say the 52% of Google AI things were in the top 10, Webflow didn't come up with that stat.
Right.
I don't remember the source, but we have a source and we put it on the page and that kind of thing. Or the Bain stat, right? That's an external stat. Finally, measurement. We surveyed 400 marketers and said, what are you measuring? And they said, in my humble opinion, a right evolution. First, they started with their own existing analytics tool and said, hey, how much traffic am I getting? And when folks are like, is AEO important to me? I'm like, start here. If it's 1% of traffic and growing rapidly, but it's still 1%, it's something to think about. But folks that are like, I'm dropping everything, I'm gonna go focus on AEO, no, it's 1%. Over time, be ready for it, learn and explore. Then how well is it converting? And if this isn't much higher, something's up. And then you go by the profound or the scrunch and you say, all right, was I mentioned? Did I show up? And I humbly suggest, first you'll go play and say, did I show up yourself? Then you'll go mention it systematically, measure it systematically. Then you'll go say, hey, did I show up regularly versus my competitors? Was it accurate? And what was the sentiment on it? And how was my message pulled through? And then finally, you'll go use it to influence where you're investing, because we all have some resources. That's my humble suggestion on the path to take. There are a bunch of tools that do that. This is neither endorsement nor dinging. This happens to be a list that Dreesen put together a while ago. And so I come back to, sorry, here, if you want that one. I come back to, overall, I invite you for yourself and to guide your teams. We happen to be a Profound customer, but we're like, Scrunch guys are great. We also are a SEMrush customer, similar web customer. I invite you to invite your teams to think about this in these 4 buckets. Content, where you go from keywords to questions to personalization. Technical, where you go from on-page SEO to adding structure and metadata on super fast sites. Authority, where you go from backlinks to plain text mentions pointing to engaging experiences. And finally, measurement, where you go from keyword ranking to did I show up to what was my share of voice, etc. And we then thought, hey, does this have an impact? As a case study of one for us, it very much does. We show up in 60% of the questions we care about. We're number 2 behind another CMS that has 60% market share. I wonder who that might be. And yet we have less than 2% market share of all websites. And so it really can help you punch above your weight. And I really would posit to the 73% of top 10 results have schema, but 88% of sites don't. It's early innings in a new medium. You can have advantage in a way you could in the early days of search before everybody's doing it. How hard do we claw for one spot in search rankings? Well, 20 years ago, we could have bigger gains. It's similar here. And so we then took this and made up 5 different levels of maturity and came up with, okay, here's a whole maturity model. These 4 categories, those 5 levels that we hope, they're not the be all end all, but they're a helpful guide for planning your work, for setting expectations to others internally, for guiding and measuring your teams. And this, we then baked into an assessment tool. If you go to webflow.com/AEO, or go to this link, which is that, go to this QR code, which is that, you can put in your domain name and email, and we will run a dozen different agents across 1,700 lines of prompts that'll look at your site, look off your site, and assess them against that rubric, and send you a custom report, no pitch of Webflow. It's LLMs. Sometimes they get it wrong. They'll be like, add FAQs. You're like, I have FAQs. It is genuinely useful. It is helpful in getting the conversation started internally. By the way, when you come out 2 out of 5, know that this is about going from SEO to AEO. More than half come out at 2. So that's like, don't be upset. Or have someone internally be like, you're not doing a good job. It's like, no, this is the extra to go do that. But we hope that's a useful thing for everybody. Question?
So will you share this PowerPoint?
This PowerPoint effectively is, I'd be happy to share this, but like, it really is this. What I did was walk through this in a more consumable way. And that page points to, if you're interested, what, oh, I thought you called my name, sorry. Points to 4 different blog posts. Each one goes through 1 category in depth. Points to an ebook that goes through in depth, no pitch, just going through this framework.
Okay.
Of course, Webflow can help you on these, but like it really is standalone content on this with that.
Click on that QR code and go.
That's the humble suggestion, yeah. What's that?
I got a 406 error on that URL.
Webflow.com/AEO?
Yeah, made me sad.
No way, that's a first.
I just did it, it worked too.
Yeah, I got to.
Did you refresh? Let me just try right now.
Alright, I'll try again at home when I have better internet, I guess.
Yeah, no, it worked for me right here. And I'll just show everybody so you can see. This is it, and then it'll say, hey, you can enter your email and domain, and then here is that framework, an example, and all the tools you can go use. Being sensitive to time, I will briefly cover, once you get everybody to your website, the next job is to convert them, to get them to take an action you want. And we tend to not be great at it. We spend $600 billion a year driving people to our websites, and we fail 95 to 98% of the time to convert them. This goes to the personalization discussion before. In my humble opinion, that's because we do an awesome job
personalizing to the individual in the moment with the right message in all of our other channels, and then they get to our website and we're like, nice to meet you. What can I do for you? And I humbly submit, you think about that in the 4 buckets we were talking about before. Everyone, a segment, an account, an individual. I know people don't think about it this way, right? These are separate teams, separate budgets, separate strategies, but really it's a spectrum of how granularly am I going to improve the experience in a data-driven way. And I bet it's preaching to the choir to say to this room, do it in a scientific method kind of way where you have a hypothesis, you then go test it, you measure the results. And you want to be able to do that quickly because most tests don't win. Industry averages 10 to 30% win rate on A/B tests. Not when you first start. If you've never done it before, sure, you're going to be a hero, absolute hero. But once you're at some steady state, most don't. So you want to be able to do it quickly and efficiently. And you want to be able to slice and dice the results and scratch your curiosity itch, develop new hypotheses. We're happy to help in all of these different dimensions. Happy to talk about any of these, but that's not the point of this. And we will now then turn to Q&A and the panel. I hope this is useful. We're all co-discovering this together. Thanks for listening to the pre-talk. Appreciate it. Switch screen. Sorry for this other.
Alrighty, thanks so much, Guy, for that presentation. That was awesome. So, wanted to introduce 2 extra guests here. We've got Dave Christensen from Awardco, and then Jared from AEO Press. If you guys just want to take a quick minute to introduce yourself to everybody, then we'll kind of start, going into some questions. We've got some pre-prepared questions to ask, and then we'll open it up as well to anybody who's got additional questions. So, yeah, Dave.
Yeah, pleasure. Dave Christensen, lead the marketing team at Awardco. I've been there about 2 years. Awardco's in the HR tech space. Just very much at the beginning of learning all this with you. So excited to be here.
Hey, Jared Malin, and I lead technology at an agency called Edgar Allen, maybe the number 2 best agency out there. But I also run and started a company called AEO Press. So ChatGPT is a giant global AEO answer engine, but I think you should have that on your own website. You should have your own local AE. So that's what that does. That's awesome. Yeah, take it.
Awesome, thank you. So I think we wanted to start with Dave and just hear from you. You guys at Awardco, are a big brand here in Utah. What have you guys been doing? Like, how have you started to implement AEO in your guys' marketing and what you see there?
So very early innings for us, but we took the opportunity last year as we redid our website to get back to the fundamentals that we all know. And I think what you'll see from a lot of my comments are none of this science really matters if you don't fully understand your positioning, your messaging, your ideal customer profile, your segments, and all of that. So we did the work to make sure we understood all that, and then just got back to the fundamentals, particularly starting with the website. So thinking very, as scientific as we could get at understanding how we structure our pages, making sure all our eyebrow text and our header text were, structured in a way that was clear to answers in all forms. We, like many of you, we've started to experiment with how we show up in a lot of these AI tools, and we're thinking, we're talking with a number of the Profounds of the world, the Scrunches of the world. We have an agency who uses Scrunch, and understanding where our content gaps are. But what I would say is, before we got too scientific with it, where we did get scientific was, do we understand who we sell to? Do we understand why we win? Do we understand the most common questions that our customer is asking? And then doing the basics, the FAQs, making sure our site nav was implemented in a proper way that is understandable, digestible, readable, all of that. And then we've really started to lean into, it's like PR and media and digital they're all back. And so When I joined Awardco, many of you probably knew Awardco, but the brand wasn't that big. And so we've started to lean in with our CEO, like, hey, we're gonna get you on this podcast and we're gonna get you on stage at this event. And we're gonna do all these things so that our authority all of a sudden is being cited across, number of new authority areas that we didn't necessarily have before. So it's not a super exciting answer of like, I know we've got a lot of scientists in the room. And I guess what I get across is, we can only do so much in our corner as we think about, doing the versus pages and making sure our schema is in the right spot and our page structures. If your growth of your company is hinging on AEO, you've got a product market fit problem. And what I appreciate about AI generally is it accelerates your end game. You're either going to know that you're bad quicker or that you're great quicker. And so I would advise all of us to get out of the office and get on the front line with the field event team, with the sales team and whatnot, to really understand what you need to create to then put on the page for the AEO and the optimization. So that's a long-winded answer of like, we're getting back to fundamentals.
Yeah, I love that. So have you guys seen any, meaningful results so far, seen any trends kind of from some of those efforts earlier this year?
Yeah, one thing we do on our team that we implemented is we review a sales call weekly, and then we look at it in our stand-up. And we had one sales call that we reviewed, and I've been in sales, and I've gotten really good at looking at and like understanding, like I think we're getting secret shopped by a competitor or whatnot. We had a company show up that just had oddly specific questions where you're like, either an investor's trying to do diligence on us through somebody, or a competitor's trying to learn about our roadmap, or it was just oddly specific. And we finally got down to it. And this is more anecdata, not totally all the data you're looking for yet. But we said, how did you know how to ask these questions? What did you hear about us? And he's like, I've done all my research on ChatGPT. I knew it was you and two other guys that I needed to talk to. And so I showed up, and what surfaced is like, I knew I needed to ask you guys about this pricing model for your competitor. I knew I needed to ask you about, this blog post you mentioned when this, product was going to come out. And so those all these specific questions were showing up in the answer engine. And that to us was a good sign that all of our efforts in keeping our content fresh, in how we're thinking about product releases and product launches, were showing up in the right way. And not necessarily, none of it was negative. So that's one anecdotal piece to say that we are showing up in those engines, not in a perfect way, but before we had redone the website and thought about the fundamentals, the structure, the ICP, we would not have shown up that way. So the buyer's doing research, and we're happy with how we're showing up. Still some work to do.
Yeah. No, and I think that just speaks to how the buyer's journey overall is changing. I mean, I've seen it myself in shopping for a few softwares. I'm not going through every site looking for it. I'm starting out with ChatGPT, getting a list, and then going and doing a bit more research. So that's really cool. Any other just like kind of interesting things that you've seen as you've started to test this, and maybe anything that surprised you as you've started to work on learning more about AEO at Awardco?
I think the freshness of the content is incredible. With SEO, you used to have to wait the 6 to 12, the 18 months, and like maybe this blog post, it's going to hit. Like I promise you, it's going to hit. It's going to have its results. I don't even remember what it was or what post we put out there, but it was like a couple days later, we saw it was cited on ChatGPT, and we're like, wow, we can control our narrative that much now. And so I think as marketers, it's really fun to see that we can control our narratives and see faster results. Again, AI is there to push to the eventual end game. Either you suck or you're great or you're somewhere in the middle, but it's going to push you to a result faster. And so we're really excited that we have the opportunity to control our narrative in a different way that we never have. But the flip side of that is your competitors are also out there putting stuff into the ether on who you are, how you price, things that you do in your product. And so you have to be very aware and make sure that your content game is strong and that you're fresh with everything. So
yeah, super interesting. I guess on that topic of kind of speed to getting content out there and how fast it gets cited, any other comments, from our other panelists here on what you've seen on that front?
So when I was first playing around with AEO Press, one of the first tests I did is just say, I have a secret, put up that post, that HTML page, and then go to ChatGPT and ask it. And it happens more or less automatically. There's definitely like some caching period, but it can happen within days. The only problem is these models are non-deterministic, and so you ask that question one time, you get the answer you want. You ask it another time, it's completely different. And so, yeah, it happens quick, but it's also like one of maybe 16 answers that it's going to give.
yeah, it's not as consistent, I guess. Guy, anything from you on that? Or, cool. I think just another question, just more for the whole panel here is, as a marketer, learning about AEO, like what would your guys' main tips be for someone in the room today if you're, going to have a few things that you take away from this meeting and you go do, what would you guys recommend to do now, that anybody could do on their site?
I'll take a crack. Assuming you've got the fundamentals, as several have said, right? You know whom you're marketing to. Excellent point, couldn't agree more. Your links work and all that. The first two things I'd go after, different than SEO, would be answer questions and schema. Go do those two things. They're I think the highest impact first things to go after. After that, I would then go think about offsite authority. But the first two, if you're only going to do two, I'd do those.
So I'm gonna take this guy's energy and I'm gonna say you just generate a ton of content. The way I'm thinking about AEO is you have an iceberg and on the top you have the human website. And that's what people are gonna be able to link to and different things. But these answer engines, they want knowledge. So if you're able to answer a question that nobody would ever actually go to, then you've got that long tail of content that you can answer questions for. And so AEO Press is all about generating the expert fan out. So if you're answering a question, let's say, where should I go out to eat tonight? It's going to split that question up into 10 different questions. It's going to ask, where should I go out to eat in Lehi? Where should I go out to eat at a fine dining restaurant? Where should I go out to eat for a low price? It's going to get all of these answers, and then it's going to summarize those answers or synthesize those answers and give you a response. So there's opportunity to get into all of those different prompts that are being written by these LLMs.
Are there certain places on a website you found that can be more effective to include some of the questions and things that you're talking about to show up versus other parts of the website?
No. So with AEO Press, we integrate with Webflow. And so when I integrate with Webflow, I'm sending everything to an AI CMS. And so everything's on that main domain. If you don't integrate with Webflow, I have an AI.domain where I generate all that content. I think your main domain is always going to rank better, especially with SEO. I'm not sure how much the LLMs really care about where the information is there, as long as it's there and they can find it.
The only other thing I'd add is go look where the LLMs are crawling at inference time to see, do they ever even see this page? That's it. But that's a corollary subset, tiny point compared to what you see.
So I think there's probably some SEO-driven companies in here. And for those companies, I think it's very important that you kind of continue to play that SEO game and make sure that you're showing up. For most of the companies in here, I'd imagine the important thing is answering your current and future customers' questions. And so if you have a point of view of the world, you should put that point of view out into the world, however you can.
Awesome, great answers here. I guess kind of another question here would be, we talk a lot about the differences, SEO and AEO being similar, and they do share some differences, but what would you say are some of the opportunities that AEO presents that you may not see necessarily just with traditional SEO?
Briefly, that whole thing was about the differences between them. I think what you said is the biggest awesome opportunity that you can have an impact tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. And that just didn't exist before. So you can speed up the feedback loop and you can go then iterate, experiment more quickly.
Anything from Jared or Dave there?
I mean, I already kind of said my spiel. There's a long tail of content that you can create, and that is what I'd recommend you do.
I guess the follow-up here is I've heard people talk about how, with AEO, you have an opportunity if you have a fresher, newer domain where it may traditionally be harder to get that to rank with the SEO because you need more of that domain authority. Is it the case with AEO where you could have, a new company get a new domain and start showing up in some answers much sooner than you could potentially rank for SEO?
Yeah, I think there's two separate types of, let's say, AEO. One is more global, where you want to show up as who are the top 10 Webflow agencies? in that case, you really need to optimize for SEO and to make sure that you're showing up on these lists. But then there's a second kind that's more local. Like you may go after this conversation and say, what does AEO.press do? In that case, the LLM is going to go fetch that page and it's going to know everything it needs to know. So thinking about those two separate ways that people are finding content within LLMs, I think is useful.
I think it depends. Like if you're a brand new entrant and you have 3 blogs and like you were on a podcast, no. You still have to have a point of view. Point of view has to be out there. It has to be in multiple channels. It has to be, whether it's digital PR, it has to be your own stuff. It has to be, you've got to have enough things out there. And so we actually did a domain switch from .co to a .com, but we had 10 years of content that we could port over, and we were able to recover those keywords in record time, and we were able to do that. But we had a huge content base to go off of, and we were able to use some of the newer AEO strategies and get some advice from an agency we were working with to make sure we showed up. But you still, point of view, authority, declarative, like what is your content, what is your voice? You can have an incredibly optimized website, but if you don't have any of that out there, it's still you're not gonna see results.
Awesome, thanks for those answers. I guess something for me as a marketer that I'm trying to understand more of is like how the LLMs really work and maybe how that differs from the way Google search works. So I guess, Jared, for you, is there any ways that you kind of see some differences between the Google search and that algorithm versus the way LLMs work that would be important to know as a marketer?
Sure, I think with LLMs, everything's more probabilistic. So Google's essentially counting links. You're going to show up or not show up based on some algorithm of inputs. But yeah, with LLMs, they are by design non-deterministic. So they're going to start from a different spot every time. And so even if you have the right information out in the world, it may or may not answer that question based on how you want it to. And so just understanding that you don't have the control that you had with SEO and just embracing it.
Yeah, question over here.
So correct me if this line of thinking is wrong, but I've always been kind of curious about this difference between Google and AI. AI, generally speaking, in a very simplistic term, seems to parrot back phrases, concepts, words that it sees in the most common arrangement, right? I know that's a super simple way to describe it, but that would then mean a lot of duplicate content saying the exact same thing is one of the best ways to get an LLM to say what you want it to say about who you are, what you're doing, which flies contrary to duplicate content sort of fundamentals of SEO. Like, have you guys, one, is that line of thinking correct? Like, is it really a goal of getting more content and the same type of content out across the web? Is that a good strategy? And two, how can you do that without necessarily taking those duplicate content type penalties from Google, which you want to avoid?
So I think we're in black hat days. So I think that would probably work for AEO. I think Google's much more sophisticated. And so you're going to get the penalty from Google, but probably the incentive from ChatGPT. And I don't know where it all shakes out, but that's how I think about it.
Yeah, that resonates a lot. And to the extent then, like, if you got a bunch of folks to put the exact same top 10 list with different stuff around it.
I mean, that's what everybody's doing these days, right?
Totally, yes, and it is absolutely working today. Now, does that mean that the 500 words around that were all identical? Maybe, maybe not, and I agree with you that that's the stage we're in. I am cautiously optimistic, and I anecdotally observed the LLMs closing the holes faster than Google did back in the day, but we're just in a different compute environment than they were 20 years ago.
I also think the companies are going to kind of lie about what you should do and what's going to work. So I had a friend who's an SEO guy. He's telling me about some large SEO-driven company, and he said they just put the gas on AI-generated content, and the numbers just kept going up.
When I asked Vivian how much of that AirOps content was human reviewed? The answer was not 100%. Now, AirOps says, hey, we do a great job. You put in I'm not bagging on AirOps at all. They're a fantastic tool. They're a partner of ours. We have mutual case studies. Like, we love them. But they were like, hey, we've got your style guide, your like full brand guidelines, your full feature function, sort of brand and data and facts. But to your point, I would have assumed she had to review and edit everything. She didn't. And that surprised me that she could get those kind of results with that.
Which, by the way, then contradicts the graphite data that I shared, right? Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting. Thanks for those answers. One other question here would be, I guess, for you guys, is there any bad advice you see out there that, you would caution against, I guess?
I mean, I don't know if it's bad, but you kind of know Reddit is the place everybody's talking about. Most likely, if you're a business, you'd do well on Reddit.
Yeah. I think that one, you should prioritize LLMs.txt top of the list, and the other one, just like SEO, right? We all heard thousands of things that are important, really like 3, 4, 5 matter. I think the same is likely to be true over time with AEO.
Something I built into AEO Press very early is TXT versions of all the pages, because there has been people within the AI space who said, like, that's optimal for these LLMs. It is optimal, but nobody's using it.
So, question for you. I wondered for a while, for TXT versus MD, I presume Markdown doesn't make that much of a difference. More importantly, I thought, hey, should we create sidecar pages for every page, where every page has a Markdown or text version right next to it, and that's what LLM's text points to? And then I thought, well, no, that'll be considered black hatty. You better stick it in the schema on the page, all of which was logic, not data. You're saying it worked.
No, I'm saying it didn't work.
You didn't. Okay.
I do it.
But you're not penalized for it. You're not black hatted for it.
I'm not penalized that I know of. I will say that.
Did you try it on the page?
The TXT
in the metadata, right? Did you give a plain text rendering of the page in metadata?
So you would have whatever slug.html and whatever slug.txt.
That I get, yeah.
That's what I support today. I do track bots. The user bots and search bots are never hitting those files. The training bots actually do hit those files.
Which is far less impactful.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Cool. I've just got a couple more questions and then we'll open up to the audience. So I guess as far as tracking and data with this, I know, Guy, you mentioned some of the metrics that you look at. You've got, share voice, visibility. Is there any other data that's out there? Because at least right now it seems like you have much less data into what's happening in the LLMs than you do with Google, where you've got Google Search Console. Is there any data that's important to know about that you can start tracking on your site just to see where you're at?
Yeah, so I track all the bots, which is a little bit difficult because they don't run JavaScript. So you have to put something in front of your website if you're using a managed hosting provider like Webflow. But we track user bots, search bots, training bots, all other bots, and human traffic. And human traffic is like 90% of bots that pretend not to be humans or pretend to be humans. So I'd say over 50% of the web is just bots running amok. There is a ton of money going into prompt data. I don't really believe in it that much because of how non-deterministic LLMs are. Non-determinism plus your history, they're giving wildly different answers every single time. So it's a decent representation that they can generate of the world, but until they offer an ad product and start giving us real data, I doubt the value of it.
I echo all of that and think it is an inevitability that we'll get GSC and we'll get the ads data, right? This will follow. There's just too much economic incentive. We will follow down that path. On the data, I humbly made suggestions before. On the bots, I think focusing on where the inference time bots go, that's what matters. That's the signal that matters of, hey, they're looking at this at the time somebody's asking a question. I'm curious if either of you have tried, haven't investigated,
that a couple of browsers, Arc being one of them, were taking aggregated query data and selling that in a very aggregated way so you could get the equivalent of GSC. Have either of you heard or played with that?
No.
No, Profound is the one that I've used in the past, and they supposedly buy a bunch of data, they say.
And that must be one of, that's where I heard it, that was one of their sources, because they don't have the source data there, but Arc does.
Yeah, and it's all very kind of like in the shadows. I don't really trust any of it, but it needs to exist in the world.
Have you tried looking at your log files? Because if you have, in your log files, if you find that LLMs are accessing 404 pages or soft 404 pages, if your website doesn't load those 404 pages correctly. But if you check the URL select, that will give you a lot of clue into what the query was, because ChatGPT, for example, often puts the query in the URL select.
So,
yeah, the tracking that I do
Yeah.
is the log files.
Yeah, and we, by the way, you mentioned, hey, you can't put JavaScript to learn. We, in our analytics product, did exactly that. Put it out at the edge of Cloudflare, and we look at the log files, and do find that valuable. To your point, given the hallucination of destination pages, like being thoughtful about your 404 matters a lot. I wish it were easier to say, oh, if it's an LLM sourced 404, do something different with it. You know, point them to like my, I don't know, general pitch page or something. Yeah.
So these logs do have a refer if it is coming from ChatGPT, and you do know the name of the file that it's hitting. So I am definitely thinking about how I use that information to generate new content. So that's kind of like actively what I'm thinking about with AEO Press.
and I humbly totally agree, that's the best signal today. What's the content?
The problem is it's not one-to-one. So they come at random times, but if you are asking a question, sometimes it's not going to have sources at the bottom. Sometimes it's going to have sources at the bottom, but they're not actually hitting your site, they're using their cache version. Google has an entire web that's cached, and so they're not giving you any of that data. So it's complex.
And some of them, as you probably know, self-declare, this is my training bot, this is my inference bot, this is, and some of them don't, as another complicating factor. And you don't know, like, somebody could be like, what's a good enterprise website builder? Is that why they landed on this page? Or did they want the specific feature on that page? Like, yeah, right, today.
Awesome. Any other questions just from the crowd? We can take a few more and then we'll wrap this up.
How do you see all of this changing or behaving differently with like local SEO, for example? If so.
To your point about the long tail, I think it's fantastic for local SEO. I think this is a wonderful opportunity. To me, the data-driven part of that was seeing the 2.5x more domains being pointed to by LLMs. That's wonderful. I think, for a bigger brand, that's like, hey, answer the nth degree feature question. For local, it's much more likely to have an impact, and you can go create more content and get more bang for the buck. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I have limited experience, but my wife has a ballet studio, and so I run AEO Press on her ballet studio, and she's kind of top for our area, up in Midway. But it's all low-hanging fruit because like all of these local companies have just terrible web presence.
Sure.
So like just a little bit will get you a lot.
I found that the business listing really goes into a lot of it, especially with ChatGPT. I have a client that they just barely started their website, and they're ranking well for like they're due cremation service, like different things for services. They're ranking well for like San Francisco cremation services as part of the blog post put out there around it, but they're not listed yet in the local way. These are the businesses that would actually do this because of the amount of reviews and everything else that's gone into those other business listings. So business listings still have a big time.
Just like Wikipedia for a larger company, or
Yeah.
not good. Go ahead.
The LLMs definitely want third-party data. That's why we all talk about Reddit. Nobody's really talking about Google reviews or anything, but I imagine like that's a huge value proposition for providing this authority that we talk about as being important.
And G2 is like, hey, we're number 3 behind Reddit. Like, yeah.
So a question here regarding the local SEO then with the recent lawsuit that Google had with SERP API, it makes it harder for a lot of these platforms to get this great Google search results, right? That including the business, their business profile that's on the SERP. How would that impact those LLMs and if they no longer have access to that SERP API data?
So the big LLMs will respect robots.txt, and so I imagine they'll respect like whatever Google's telling them. All of the rogue smaller AIs, they hit everything. So
yeah,
it will impact that.
And it's not crazy to think, just like Reddit did a deal with 2 of them, that they'll just say, hey, that's too important for us, we need access to that.
So whether you have limited resources or not, given Google's role from a search standpoint and their recent advancement with Gemini and how it's being used, is there a strategy to suggest that what you should do is focus on AEO for Gemini first before you worry about any other AI platform?
I bet Kai has better stats than I do, but ChatGPT is like 80% of the market, maybe it's down to 60 now. So I still think they're the big fish. Gemini obviously has a ton of value. I prioritize that one at least second.
And I don't know that showing up on one versus showing on the other is going to be different fundamentally. So it's, while Gemini has surged in the last, 6 weeks or so and ChatGPT has gone down, I think the fundamentals remain the same. So that's my only thought on it.
I echo both in that, for Webflow and when we look across our customer sites in aggregate, it's actually higher than 80. I think for Webflow, it's at like 95 right now of not of traffic, but of signups, of things that ended up converting in our self-serve business. And on the fundamentals, I think unless you are a traffic art business, the difference in how to rank the different LLMs, it changes so often it's not worth tracking, in my humble opinion. Focus on the fundamentals. The one thing that does surprise me, and I'm curious if either of you have info on this, is like, okay, if Google's showing AIO on 43% of searches, and they have, 20, 50x the number of searches that ChatGPT does, aren't they already the largest LLM by a mile? And so I wonder if it's about how the bots self-declare and where it comes from, because in some sense, they've already won that. Even though still for us, the self-declared traffic, the conversions are that way from ChatGPT. Is that any data from you on that?
Yeah. There's not a lot of good data.
Yeah.
Similar Web or whatever the name is, they report something that, I don't know, is it true? I did come across the Cloudflare report. That had some really interesting data, and they are the source of the truth. So, you can trust their metrics. So I'd go check out the 2025 Cloudflare report +1.
I think we've got time for one more question. Do you have one right here? Or no? Okay. Sweet. Any more questions? Yeah.
For everyone else in this room who isn't at the executive level, how would you generally speak to other executives, either in marketing or across the C-suite, about what we're doing here, since it's probably more technical than they would like it?
Great question. I think it's interesting. It all depends on the stage of your business, kind of your level of product market fit, your competition, your competitive environment, the goals of the business, all these things. The way I would phrase it is you need to make it known to decision makers within your company and stakeholders that you are investing ample time and resources into this at the moment, and you are out there earning the insight. But you also need to make it known that all the answers are not there, and we're still in a very experimental era. And so if your stakeholders are coming to you and saying growth is stagnant, everything rides on our AEO strategy, you're in a tough spot. I'm not going to lie, because that's a product market fit problem. That's not an AEO problem. So I would phrase it and say, we are choosing 2 or 3 areas that we're going to make some informed bets within our AEO strategy. Maybe that's, we're going deep on versus pages. We're going deep on, maybe we're going to publish pricing to see if we can get any more traffic on our pricing because people can research what we do. Phrase it in terms of, experiments and bets that you're going to make, and make it clear that it's experimental, but you will report back on those experiments. And then also that it will require a little bit of investment, but it's not going to be fundamentally that different than a lot of the SEO and content tactics that we're used to. And that, like one of those, a very simple bet might be, hey, would like budget to go buy Profound and Scrunch, and I need to compare the 2 and see what we want to go with in terms of like mapping our content strategy to the AEO realm. So I would frame it in bets. I would say we can't expect all growth to come from AEO, and report regularly on what you're seeing in your hypotheses.
Yeah, you'll need that executive support for buying Profound. It's extremely expensive. What I would probably do is just show them something that's novel and interesting. You could just chat with ChatGPT about your company and come up with all sorts of interesting findings that they would love to know about. Tracking bots is super interesting. When I kind of unlock that, it's wild to see just like how much bot traffic there is. But then also just being able to say like, these are the important pages, these are why these pages are important. And again, like there's a million little tools that you could find that generate some novel report. Maybe some of those would be interesting as well. This one, this Webflow AEO one would be a great one to start with.
A couple of things come to mind. I would go with them and say, hey, what's my company do? And then talk to them about how, an increasing percentage of our prospects are having their first story about us told by these tools, if they need motivation on how to pay attention to it. And if you're in B2B, Forrester surveyed marketers, 95% of B2B buyers said they're going to use an LLM in their buying process this year. So, okay, it matters. And then I would I totally agree with the experimentation, and I would measure total human referred traffic from LLMs so that one, you tell them it is impossible for all of our growth to come from AEO. It's just, that's not the world we're in right now. And or if you're in an industry where your buyers just aren't using LLMs, I'm gonna unfairly stereotype. If you're buying Caterpillar tractors, that's not like B2B SaaS. You know what I mean? I'm gonna pretend that they use LLMs less. Is another one. And the last is to, if you have trained them, which most of us have, to evaluate you on total organic traffic to the site and it's going down, help them understand we are in a period of change, just like we were in the early days when we were learning about branded and unbranded and like way early, right? It's like that early here. So you've got this smaller chunk of traffic that's much higher intent. We need to treat these 2 differently for a while and look at the downstream impact. And then at some point when things settle out, which is not now, it's probably several years away, then we can look at total traffic again. But to retrain them and say we're in a different era, don't BP up because traffic's going down.
Yeah, I would add one anecdote. Like we wanted to run a pricing experiment, us in sales, and say like we want to publish one of our minimum prices on our webpage. And one of the things that got us over the line with the stakeholders, like we went side by side with them at ChatGPT and said like, what is a WordCo price versus competitors? And like, they brought up that we were more expensive than a couple of competitors, and our SMB team says like, hey, we think we're not even getting to deals because people are doing research and we're not even showing up in the funnel. And all it took was 1 or 2 stakeholders to see that, and they're like, that's interesting, that's an interesting hypothesis, let's go test it. So we did put the minimum price on the page. It's not all our package, but we did, and we saw 10 deals close in a matter of 60 days, and a lot more deals come to fruition. Like just have a strong point of view and a hypothesis and kind of sit shoulder to shoulder and say, we think we're not being included because the buyer research, they're much more educated, and whatever we're putting on our page is not enough. And so that's one anecdote.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all the great questions. I've just got one last slide to share here about some of the results we've seen as we've been doing this work for our company at Amply. I'll grab that here. Yeah, so for me, I heard Guy, share a very similar presentation about AEO back at Webflow Comp in August, and that really got us thinking about how we could start doing that for Amply and our brand. And so since then, we've really been trying to implement some of these things, improve, ad schema and those things to the site, and also just shift the way we think of some of our content. And so since then, some of the results that we've seen, is we've seen a 5x increase in the amount of leads we're getting through the LLMs. So we're getting, I think, only 2-ish on average coming from LLMs before that time. And now we're seeing about, on average, 10 leads coming through the LLMs for us every month. And then as far as our visibility, we've seen an 8% increase. A lot of that's just by shifting some of our content and noticing what the LLMs are citing and creating more of that content. And then we've seen our overall citations go up by 160%. So we went from being cited 25% of the time for our target prompts to now 65% of the time. So one of the coolest things to see from this has just been how fast of a turnaround it is. With SEO, you're waiting much longer to see results, whereas we were putting out some of this new content and seeing it start being cited, within a week or 2 weeks from it being published. So that's been really exciting and fun to see. And I'm excited to see how those trends, stay. Well, we may need to keep creating a lot of new content. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. But definitely would encourage you all to take, what you've learned here today, start implementing it into your companies. And if you need any help on that or any questions, we're here at Amply to help. And so we'll hang around. And so if anyone has more questions, feel free to come up and talk to us. And we've got some food back here from Village Bakers. So if you want to grab that, you can still hang out in the space. Or if you want to just grab and go, you're welcome to do that too. So again, thank you. Wanted to thank all of our panelists, Webflow, AwardCo, AEO Press for coming out and helping us, and all of you for coming out to the event. So once again, thanks everyone.
There's plenty of swag back here too, so that's Webflow swag.
Yeah, so I was it's like a